Good day, this is Mike, and welcome to Kung Fu's Day on Golden Age of Geek. Here we'll be looking at one of my favorite genres of all time, the Kung Fu movie. This is part 2 of my look at the career of the man who defined the Shaw Brothers Kung Fu film, Cheh. In the first part, we looked at the work he did with Jimmy Wang Yu, and we saw how those films were focused on the individual and on individual achievement. The fascinating thing about Cheh is that his body of work encompasses such a wide variety of themes. We can go from the Wang Yu films to the films he did with David Chang, not to be confused with the famous chef in New York, and T. Lung. David Chang and T. Lung did work separately, and many of those films were classics in their own right, like T. Lung's Delightful Forest, which, is neither delightful nor does it take place in a forest, but it's a pretty awesome film, so check that one out. And they were often part of larger ensembles, as in Five Shaolin Masters, All Men Are Brothers, and several other films like Seven Man Army. But when they were paired together with Cheh, the films took on a unique flavor. The focus this time was on brotherhood. David Chang and T. Lung were bros to the end in their films, and often that end was an exceptionally bloody one. Here are just a few of their notable team-ups. Vengeance is a movie that a lot of people talk about. It's a lot like One Armed Swordsman or The Assassin, and that's a film that doesn't really need to apologize for itself despite being a Shaw Brothers Kung Fu movie. It's a damn good film, is what it is. It's set in the 1920s in China, where T. Lung plays an opera performer whose wife is having an affair with a local criminal. When the crime boss has him murdered, David Chang, his best friend, shows up looking for, title drop, vengeance. Now, the plot lifts several beats right out of the old Lee Marvin film, Point Blank, including a famous scene where our hero forces an enemy to take a bullet that was intended for him. This would also be a good time to point out the fight choreography. After Jimmy Wang Yu, Cheh worked with performers who were increasingly better at on-screen combat. This would later peak with the Venom Mob in the late 70s and early 80s. David Chang and T. Lung aren't as good as the Venom Mob, but just look at any fight of theirs compared to Jimmy Wang Yu and you see a quantum leap in quality. The fighting in Vengeance is pretty awesome. It isn't as elaborate as some of the later Shaw Brothers entries were. There were several scenes that are pretty down and dirty. The fight scene in the bathroom really stands out. It's almost modern in its simplicity and brutality. At one point, Chang kills an opponent by literally kicking his head in. But this movie is also a bit like a Sam Peckinpah film, although that term gets thrown around a lot. I do mean it in that while there's plenty of bloody violence in this movie, there's also a lot of strange beauty to it. A lot of the shots are incredibly staged, beautifully photographed, and T. Lung's protracted death scene has almost a bit of poetry to it as it cuts back between his real death and a death he has portrayed on stage many times before. And it ends with the curtain closing just as he dies. Moving on to the new One Armed Swordsman, we find a great example of the differences between the films Cheh made with Jimmy Wang Yu and the films he made with David Chang and T. Lung. The film was a reworking of the original. It again features a swordsman who loses an arm. The big difference is that in the original, Jimmy Wang Yu pulled himself out of his misery. He received help from the movie's best girl, who, much like the female character in Angel and the Bad Man, represented a move away from his violent and overall masculine martial arts world. Here, the unfortunate swordsman, David Chang, is inspired by a noble, honorable warrior from that very world, T. Lung, who becomes his best bro and inspires him to, regain his confidence and his martial prowess. Rather than striking out on his own path, Chang is forced back into the martial arts world to avenge T. Lung when he is gruesomely murdered by the movie's villains. Even when working with the same basic plot, the theme and message changes quite a bit by placing the emphasis on brotherhood and sacrifice as opposed to the individual and pursuing one's own path. The Pirate is a rollicking adventure film. It has a few scenes on the ocean which are pretty impressive for the Shaw Brothers, which for the most part like to shoot most of their films on their sound stages and on their massive backlog. T. Lung plays the titular noble rogue whose ship has floundered near a village that's under the control of an evil brother and sister. David Chang plays a government official who's supposed to catch pirates, but he can't resist the pull of the bromance between him and T. Lung. Actually, their relationship kind of takes a back seat. The highlight of the film is an extended beachside battle with the evil Sibs and their minions. The subsequent fight between David Chang and T. Lung is almost anticlimactic, but it's a fun way to end the film, and this is one of the few Cheh films where both heroes live at the end, and the ending is about as happy as it gets. Blood Brothers, or Chinese Vengeance, not to be confused with Vengeance, from which we talked earlier, is another Cheh film that has garnered a lot of praise, like One Armed Swordsman or Vengeance. And as we saw with Jimmy Wang Yu, Cheh will often explore the darker side of his themes. This time, Cheh and Chen Quan-tai, who we'll get to in the next installment, play two bandits who befriend T. Lung, who is a scholar/warrior in ancient China. T. Lung is an ambitious man, and he plans to pass the government exams and rise up the ranks. He also plans to take his new blood brothers, David Chang and Chen Quan-tai, with him. But he can't resist his attraction to Chen's younger wife, which leads to betrayal and tragedy. This is a movie that is most remembered for the characters and the small moments rather than the action scenes. And seen in the original Cantonese with subtitles instead of the usual horrible English dubbing, those quiet moments really do shine. As a side note, I hope at some point classic kung fu movies like this one will get better dubs. The anime crowd has successfully forced companies to release shows with high-quality dubs. These films deserve the same treatment. Now, that's just a small part of the David Chang T. Lung team-up. There are many more to check out. Next time, Kung Fu's Day is a segment I like to call The Paths of Glory. Be sure to like, subscribe, or comment, and I will see you next time on Golden Age of Geek.